Hello all, I'm doing a rag joint replacement on my 1969 Ford F100. I have tore into it already, but got hung up. I searched on YouTube for a couple videos and none of them were very helpful. So I'm going to make my own, hoping that I can help somebody else along the way. Here's the part that I got from my local parts store. I'm sure your local parts store has it. I think it was less than $30. Not really that big of a deal. Now I'll show you where I'm at. I had to remove my windshield washer fluid container to get to it. However, I have the bolts in the steering, the coupler itself out, which are this one and this one. I have those out. I also have this bolt here taken out. It is a 12.7/8 bolt. A 6-point socket will not work on this bolt. It is not stripped. It's a 12-point socket. Please keep that in mind. So I have that loosened and out. I have also grab my light here. I have also gone inside the cab. I have loosened the 2 bolts on the bottom of the steering column. I don't know if that's important or not, but I've done it. And I've pulled on the steering wheel. You can see there's a bit of an excessive gap there. It's come out about an inch. So I've pulled on the steering wheel. I've loosened all of the bolts on the rag joint itself and pulled. And then I've gotten the rag joint to come off of the steering gearbox by about an inch, and that's it. I need more clearance for it to come off. As you can see, I'm all the way up against the bottom of the steering column, which is this piece here. Now I believe, it's kind of trial and error here, but I believe if I loosen this bolt back here, it should give me free play in the column that I can slide it out. I'm gonna try that, and I'll let you guys know how that goes. All right, now as you can see back there, I've loosened said bolt much more than I probably needed to. However, I wanted to just so I had as much play as possible. Now I'm going to go inside the cab, grab the steering wheel, and give her a better pull and see if I can't increase my gap between this point here and this rubber part of the rag joint. Well, sure enough, I gave her a good pull. Now it's far enough away that I should be able to get that rag joint off, put the new one on, and tighten everything back up. Since I had already torn into it, by the time that I started making this video, I'll take you through each step in putting it back together in hopes that you could follow the process backwards to take yours apart. Here we go. Okay, as expected, that did give me enough room to get the old one off. The differences I'm noticing are obviously the bolts here look different, and these pins look a little smaller than the old ones. So I'm kind of concerned about that, but if I put everything back together and it seems tight, I mean, I guess it's not that big of a deal. As far as the other side, this one comes with a standard 6-point bolt, which will be nice, just because typically you're working with 6-point sockets, not 12, but not that big of a deal. So I'll get this new one put on that spline shaft, and we'll start putting everything back together piece by piece here. Alright, I'm shimmying this new rag joint on the best I can. I may have to pry a little bit, but a thing to note, make sure that inside the cab that your steering wheel is on center. Because if it's not, from this point on, when you get everything tightened down, your steering wheel will be off center and it might bother you. Mine was off center since I bought it, so maybe after this replacement, mine will be on center and it won't bother me anymore. So keep that in mind. Another thing to note, I just went to try to pry this on. I have that much free play with one finger on my steering box. I'm not sure if that's normal or not. I'm gonna ask a few people to find out, but just another thing to note if you're also having loose steering problems. Now, rather than pry, I was able to actually go inside the cab and use the steering wheel as leverage against the new rag joint. I kept pushing on the steering wheel until it got seated this far. That's a little too far. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to back that off a little bit. I probably will have to pry. But if you decide to try to use your steering wheel to kind of beat that new rag joint on, just be careful not to go too far like I did, because this could be a bit of a pain, but it shouldn't be too bad. I got it backed off the steering column just a little bit. It wasn't hard at all. I got it where I'm comfortable with it. There is a groove in the output shaft of the steering box. You can't see it, but I have this hole lined up with that groove. Do your best to do that. Another thing to note, when I took all these off just because I knew it'd be moving around, but all of these metal tabs here are supposed to be on the rubber itself. So, I mean, I could bolt this together however I want. I could put this on this side, and this metal, I just dropped a bolt, would be on this flange here, but just like here, these metal tabs are supposed to be on the rubber. So I'm gonna bolt this together with this flange on this side. So just something to keep in mind as you're throwing all your bolts back together. I got this thing all bolted up. Other than the 7/16 bolt here, I was able to tighten that with a socket, but this bolt on this side and the same one on the other side, I had to resort to the good old-fashioned wrenches. There's really not enough room between the inner fender and this thing on the steering box. And then on this side, there just seems to be no clearance to get a ratchet on it. So it took a little bit, but I got all that tightened down. Now I'm gonna start tightening everything in the opposite order that I loosened it. So I'm going to start by pulling the steering column up into place. I made sure my steering wheel is on center, so that should be nice. I'm going to pull my steering column up so that these bolts here are where they used to be, and then I'm going to tighten these bolts. I'm going to check the play, or how much gap is in between the steering wheel and the column, because that does not look normal to me. So hopefully that sucks that up. After I get those two bolts tight, I'm going to come under here and I'm going to tighten this guy here that I loosened, that was able to let me move the steering column. And after that, I'm going to tighten this guy here. And then that's all. then I'll feel for the free play in the wheel, and I'll let you guys know how it feels. Okay, I got everything that was previously mentioned tightened up. The only thing I want to say is I did find out these studs here, the size doesn't really matter. They're there in case the bolts break in an accident. These grab so you don't lose complete steering. So I'm not really concerned about the size of the stud. If you are, I know places like Melvin's Classic Ford and Dennis Carpenter sell those. You can certainly get your hands on them. But since this is what my local auto parts store had, I'm just going to roll with it. Also, some things slid out of the bottom of this. I don't know if it's like a dust cap for the bearing or whatever. Just make sure you tuck all that back in there and then slide this up and tighten it so that everything stays in place. Also to note, if you have a 3-speed shifter on the column, you'll have to reconnect your transmission linkages at these guys here. I'm not sure what this switch is all about. I'm assuming it goes along with the 3-speed shifter. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm not using that anymore, and it hasn't been connected forever, so I'm not worried about it. So all that's tightened back up. The huge gap in my steering wheel is now gone. You gotta love my cracked steering wheel and my lovely new horn button, but it's all in and back together, and I don't know, it feels like it has just as much play before, but if yours was, I should say, if your rag joint was in a lot worse shape than mine was, you would most definitely feel a difference. I've seen them where they're falling apart and mutilated and ripped, and this one doesn't look that terrible, but yours could, so you could definitely notice a difference. I might notice more of a difference when I'm out on the road actually driving it, but there's kind of my how-to on a rag joint replacement. I hope this helped. I'll probably have this truck forever, so I'll do my best to keep making some how-to videos, and hopefully it'll help you guys out along the way. Have a good day, and we'll see you later. Just a little update video. Everything is great after the replacement. The steering is a touch tighter, but I still have about this much play, which is a little more than I would prefer. So I'm gonna try to tighten the screw on the steering box, maybe like a quarter or a half of a turn, to see if that takes that play out. But the rag joint is operating fine. It's been about a week since I replaced it, and it was definitely a worn out part, so I'm glad I replaced it. And good luck with yours. Talk to you guys later.